There's a couple more folks joining. We'll give it one more minute and we'll get started. Okay, it's 10:01. So, Carol, should we do a roll call and then we'll go ahead and get started?
That sounds great. Well, I'll start with you, Teddy.
I am here.
And Yvonne Caravut, she's trying to find Wi-Fi on her way traveling, so she may come in late. Nolan Coffin.
Here.
Steve Finsky will be a little late. Steve Georgie.
Present.
Jason Hollanday.
Here.
Mark Johnson.
I'm here.
Bernadine Jocelyn.
Here.
Brian Krembier.
I'm here.
Micah Myers.
Here.
Teresa Sunday.
I'm here.
Jim Wycombe.
Good morning.
And Paul Wirtz.
Good morning.
And Dave Wolf is unable to attend today.
Great. Thank you, Carol. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our March task force meeting. We have some good topics listed out for today. I think both presentations will be from task force members, so that's always exciting when it's that way, I think, especially at the beginning of the year. Before we kind of get deep dive into the agenda, just a quick approval of the minutes that Carol sent out. Any questions, comments, concerns before we approve the minutes? Okay, hearing none, we will assume the meeting minutes are approved. So as far as the agenda for today, I see Devin is online, so we'll have Devin give us a little bit of an update on the 2022 session, how the discussions are going, what's happening there, anything of relevance that we should be aware of, and that, obviously be interested to hear any of the latest developments. From that, Jason Hollanday has graciously agreed to do a presentation on kind of sort of broadband development on the Fond du Lac band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. So I'm excited to hear a little bit about that and some of the developments there and some of the decisions that have been made. I think that will be really interesting for this group to hear. And we had always talked about doing a trip there. Hopefully, as things open up some more, maybe we'll be able to do that in the latter half of the year. But for the moment, I think we're excited to see the presentation. From there, we'll transition to Bernadine, and we'll do an update on the adoption and challenges of broadband in rural communities from the Blandon Foundation. So I think that will be a very good update on sort of from that perspective what's happening. We will take a break at that point, and depending on the time, it'll be anywhere between a 10 to 20 minute break. When we get back together, we have a few things I want to share with you. Last time we sort of brainstormed the topics we wanted to tackle, venues maybe we wanted to attend when things opened up, presenters you may want to have at the task force meeting. So specifically this time, though, is taking a little bit of time on grouping some of the topics that came up last time and really breaking them up into 3 components, which will be the subgroups for this year. So wanted to have a little bit of a review of that, see what you thought, see if there's some things missing there, and if we needed to maybe organize it a bit differently, which is totally open to that. So really having a working session so we can come up with 3 groups or 3 kind of areas. And then we won't do it at this meeting, but Carol and I will send up a follow-up with the your choices of which group you want to be in. So you let us know which one you first, second choice, and as usual, we will sort of break up the team in that fashion. That should sort of take us towards the end of the day, and then we will open it up for any public comments or any other business, and then we will adjourn. So as of now, the agenda says 1 p.m. I don't know if we'll go that late. We may be closer to 12 or 12:30, but either way, I think we have plenty of time built into the schedule. So with that, before I get started, any comments from anybody on the task force? Is there anything else you want to bring up right now? Something else we should potentially think about adding to the agenda as we plan the rest of the next couple hours together? Okay. Not hearing anything or not seeing any hands up. So with that, Devin, I'll turn it over to you, and maybe you can give us an update on what's happening in St. Paul.
Thank you, Teddy. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Task Force. Mostly just some dates to share with you coming up, and then a brief mention on a couple bills that are moving. So tomorrow it's deadline season. So tomorrow is the first deadline where committees are supposed to act favorably on bills from the House of Origin. And then second deadline is April 1st. Third deadline is April 8th. So the idea is that it's starting to be that time of year where it's like, all right, let's pick the ideas that are going to move forward and focus on those now. And so with that, we're supposed to get targets pretty soon. So the amount of money that each committee will have to spend on their particular items. Not clear when exactly those are supposed to come out, but that's the next step of the process. And then the Easter Passover break for the legislature will be from April 9th to the 18th. And ideally, we'd see omnibus bills from the committees come out before that, so they have the time to review over their Easter break. So those are some time frames to keep an eye out for. Otherwise, there was one broadband related hearing yesterday and another a couple weeks ago. There's House File 3605 and Senate File 3476. It's the line extension program, including provisions about using easements to provide broadband service. So if you remember last year, the electric co-ops had that bill to use their existing easements to provide service. This takes that a step further. And then that one has bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. And then Senate File 3617 and House File 4375. That's a bill looking to direct Commissioner Grove to use the remaining $110.7 million of the Capital Project Fund on infrastructure. That has not moved in the House, but it has been heard in the Senate. There are some other eligible uses that the CPF funds may be used for, but the Senate at least is looking to use all of it on infrastructure. And as far as I'm aware, there's still plans in the House to amend House File 14, that's Representative Eklund's bill, to a new general fund appropriation. The governor's recommendation is $170 million. I heard that he wants to be in alignment with that, but targets will probably dictate some of that as well. And that's all I have for today. Happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Devin. Any questions from task force members to Devin on latest developments? Okay, I think that's pretty much in line with kind of what we heard last time. Seems like there's some movement happening in the positive direction, so that's good to hear. Devin, as usual, thank you for the update. And I know you are a standing visitor or guest on our meeting, so we look forward to hearing from you at the next month.
Happy to. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to the next topic. Jason, I believe you are up. And I think, is Carol the one presenting, or at least sharing the screen at the moment, or will you be doing that?
Carol will.
Yeah. Okay. Can you see the screen okay?
No, we just see the task force members at the moment.
Oh, shoot. Hold on.
I know it's difficult with two screens.
Yeah. Can you
Okay.
see that?
Yeah, there we go. Up now.
Okay. Okay, good.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Floor is yours.
All right. Yeah, I was asked to kind of talk about fiber development, Indian lands in Minnesota, and so we had done this presentation before and kind of been doing some updates on it since. But I asked if this would be a good thing to present today, and they said it would. So here we go. I guess we can go to the next slide. Sort of the history behind our project. I'll kind of go through these sort of fast here. Actually, we kind of started talking about getting broadband out at Fond du Lac in 2005. I wasn't really a part of it, or my department wasn't a part of it at that point in time. But our MIS/IT department at the time was kind of given the task to how do we serve the entire reservation with broadband internet. And so they kind of did some studies, had 2 or 3 studies done. And the general challenges, which will be reverberated through this whole thing, but it's also kind of applies to the other tribes in Minnesota and rural communities in general. For us, the big thing was it was the lack of density of people. There's only like 4,000 people on the reservation, and a reservation is 100,000 acres. So that's not very dense, and that kind of kept people, the incumbent providers not to come on reservation, basically, because it wasn't really worth to do all these build outs and do the maintenance. And topography, Fond du Lac is actually rather hilly for this part of northeastern Minnesota, and it turns out our towers and wireless signals weren't able to go over and around hills too effectively. And so that was another challenge for us. And then vegetation, the pine needles and the leaves, they kind of break up wireless signals. And then, that cost was, $6.5 to $10 million in 2006. So it was really expensive, and we weren't going to be able to cover everything like we would. So we were just trying to figure out what we want to do. The tower configurations, it's 3 towers or 6 towers, and then how do you get the broadband to those towers? You have to build a road, then you have to bring in power, then you have to bring in the fiber, and then you have to build the system to broadcast it too. So you go to the next slide. So then we kind of get involved in 2000. The planning division kind of gets involved in 2007, 2008, and we did apply to grants in 2008 during the Great Recession and the ARA program through USDA for BIP and BTOP. It was really strange, applying to USDA and EDA at the time. You can kind of see on the slide there that we did USDA grants in 2008 and another one in 2009, along with USDA and EDA, I should say. And it turned out, when we talked to them on the phone, we say, basically we don't have a high density. That's why we're looking for grants to kind of do this ourselves. And they said, oh, that's fine. Submit the applications. And so we submit these applications, and we'd get them back as rejected. One of the USDA grants said we weren't rural enough, whatever that meant. And then, everyone else kind of said, well, why are you doing this? It's not economically feasible. But we had talked this through before we even applied, that we know it's not economically feasible. That's why we're asking for grant money to help do it. And so we just kind of have to just figure out how we wanted to kind of go about different things, back in the, 2008, 2009. And it just kind of led to a lot of internal discussion on how we want to try to get this project done. And if you go to the next page, or next slide, then around that time, fiber and the equipment to connect fiber started dropping in price, and it started becoming more of a player versus wireless and the associated towers. So in 2010 and 2011, we kind of abandoned the towers and wireless idea and started concentrating on fiber and fiber to the home. The technology was better, the reliability was better, and we could reach everyone if, that was entirely possible, at that time. So we kind of hired another firm to do another feasibility study on what it would take to create a fiber network on Fond du Lac Reservation. And next slide. So then we kind of started working with, all the different partners we could think of. So our previous IT director, Fred Underwood, was actually part of the Governor's Broadband Task Force back in like 2012 until he retired. Then we started working with Blandin Foundation, became a Blandin Broadband community. With them, they came here and did computer classes. We did a small sort of a Wi-Fi project on all of our governmental buildings. We got some grant money to build these small wireless antennas. And that kind of helped people see what the internet was, kind of helped people and students and just people that wanted to use the internet. But the problem is you're kind of limited to about a quarter mile of anywhere we had one of those antennas. And then we had an app camp, which we kind of had kids create apps. And at the end of the 2 weeks, they got to keep the iPad. But the unfortunate thing is a lot of places out here didn't have any connectivity. So you have an iPad, but you can't connect it to anything. So we just kept working on this overall goal to try to become, our own fiber company. It kind of, you see a little image there about sovereignty. It's important for tribes to have their sovereignty, and this is one way we were going to try to use that for us. Go to the next slide. And so we had partners here. In 2009, NESC, we worked with them, and they built that that 1,000 miles of fiber where they connected the middle mile network for northeastern Minnesota, and they connected our government buildings, our community centers, all to this network. So we kind of had the backbone built, in 2009 with that project, and then we had the 2010 Broadband Initiative Program, and then we're continuing our work with the Blandin Foundation at that point as well. And then we kind of started contacting the USDA Community Connect program because we heard that they had grants available. And go to the next slide. And so we kind of, with our partners, I think we partnered with them for 4 years. We did the Minnesota Intelligent Rural Community Program. So that kind of allowed a number of our divisions to kind of work together to kind of come up with a plan, an idea. What would we use the internet for? How do we get it? How would we, what could it be used for? It could be used for, working at home. It could be used for home health care. It could be, just simply put, if you want to watch Netflix all day or play games. And, we created, these 13 hotspots, and we did a lot of community outreach. Through that, we did PCs for people. We had computer classes, iPads in the classroom. A lot of community meetings. It turns out those community meetings and the stuff we're doing with broadband really helped us move our project forward at that point. And this kind of goes back from when we first started in 2008 when we were applying to USDA and EDA. And at that time, we didn't have that background data. We didn't have, people, we didn't have, the information gathered at community meetings. We didn't have people's statements. We didn't have, all this, background, really good information that we can show, these potential funders that, we don't have internet here and this is what it means to us. It could, help us improve our healthcare system, improve our educational system, let people go take online classes for college, work from home, all these different things. We're able to do that, through this Blandin broadband community process. To me, anyways, that's probably one of the most important things we did. That was, 2012 to 2016. Next slide, please. So then we we worked with NESC, and we applied to USDA Community Connect. We wanted, we had over 1,000 homes we wanted to try to connect. We wanted to get gigabyte fiber, synchronous for St. Louis County, Carleton County. Fond du Lac is split between two counties. Half is in St. Louis County, half is in Carleton County. Other tribes in Minnesota have similar issues, like White Earth, Red Lake, Leech Lake. They're bigger land-based tribes than we are, and they have, this is sort of a hurdle to cross because you're dealing with different governmental agencies if you want to get right-of-ways, permits, and discussing all these, different projects. And then we actually went and visited, the planning departments for St. Louis County and Carleton County, just let them know what we're doing. And if we had any questions, and try to develop that contact to see, just for process and just flowing our projects from, one place to another. So, we were able to apply for these 2 grants and go to the next slide. And the initial grants were not funded, so which was kind of disappointing to us. So we just turned around and we resubmitted those in 2016, and they were approved. So now that we had, with the matching funds and the federal amounts for both those grants, it was around $7.5 million, and we're all of us were super excited to get these. And all of a sudden, it was like, well, what do we do? now that we have, the funds to go about doing this. And part of this process, since we weren't a telecom or an eligible entity, we actually had to apply through Northeast Service Cooperative. They were the initial grantee. And so we had to work out, but we were working on getting that status. And so in 2016, we were able to approach NESC, and Fond du Lac were able to approach the USDA, and Fond du Lac became sort of the grantee versus NESC, but they did help us get the grants. So they're a very important partner to have. Again, partnerships, very important for us to have. First it was NESC, and then Landon, then back to NESC. But now we were able to get our grants, and then we were able to become the administrator of those grants, and we were able to get our project started and get off the ground. And you go on the next slide. And then kind of this is where, the state of Minnesota comes into the foreground with this too, is we ended up with 3 Community Connect grants for our project. We ended up with 2 border-to-border grants. And then we actually got a smaller grant through Housing and Urban Development, the Indian Community Development Block Grant Fund. So we had 5 grants that went to this project, just under $9 million. And about $3.5 million was actually Fond du Lac Reservation cash. It wasn't in kind. It wasn't existing staff time or land or right-of-ways or facilities. That's just money that the Fond du Lac band put into this project to make it a success. And I want to make that clear too, because some places won't have that capability of coming up with that much match for their projects. And that's another thing that I'll kind of summarize some of the things I've heard, talking with people over the years about projects like this. But next slide. We were working with contractors and ordering, hardware and fiber, and we kind of started having discussions, who's going to run this for us, or what are we going to do with it? That's sort of like now what sort of a thing. So we kind of, started talking with our tribal council and with the staff. Do we become our own internet service provider? And if we do that, do we kind of become an eligible telecommunications company? And we kind of talked over, and we decided to kind of become our own ETC at that point in time. Again, that took us down these really strange paths, working with our internal legal department, and then with external legal department, working with the different federal agencies, FCC in particular, to become an ETC. We had to come with utility easements. We had to get consent from landowners, service line agreements. We had to come up with a charter of our corporation. And then we had to, all sorts of federal and state regulations. As a tribal government, we always have a little bit more federal regulations than other agencies do. Then we have to deal with the Bureau of Indian Affairs as well, because it's hard to do like utility easements and right of ways because it takes about 6 months to a year to get those cleared from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So again, we need a lot of lead time to get all these pieces moving at once. And then, so all these regulations, since we opened up Fond du Lac Reservation for this project, the project for is everyone that lives here. Fond du Lac band members, non-band members, anyone that has a household, whenever there's a household here, they're eligible to become part of this project. And so when we're going through all these rules and regulations, do they apply to band members or don't they? I mean, like I said, it's a strange set of circumstances to navigate, but they are there. And, we were able to do it. One of the nice things we had with this project is when we built them out, with the Community Connect grants, I mean, with all these grants, I should say, we're able to connect to the home, that last mile. We're able to do all this last mile work with all these grants. So we're able to bring fiber and basically the little radio that connects to the side of the home paid for through these grants. And even like the modem inside we were able to pay for. So once we became active, it's just a matter of bringing that in and just doing the physical connections inside because the grants brought everything to the home, which really saved people a lot of money. And we had federal money and band money to help pay for that. If you have a really long driveway, it was really important for you to do that. And we had a pretty good take rate to start, but some people said, no, we're not interested. But once they really realized what we were doing and how nice it was and how fast this network is, those people actually came back and wanted to kind of become one of our customers sort of after the fact too, which we were able to do that. Next slide. So that kind of went to marketing. We hired a local firm out of Duluth, Giant Voices, and we worked with them and created our storefront name, which is Anin, which is Ojibwe for hello. So that's the name of our business. It's Anin, Connect, Share, Grow is sort of our tagline. And behind that is sort of Fond du Lac Communications, which is sort of the parent company of Anin. And we wanted to be able to better serve our customers by having this. It goes back to that sovereignty issue again, and becoming an eligible telecommunications carrier was also very important at that point in time too, because I've told other tribes that we are an ETC, but we're the telephone company, but we're also our own ISP, so we actually have control of those assets, and so we actually have control of the price too. The monthly subscription rates, and that's very important for us because we just want to be able to provide a service to the community here and not have to worry about external forces, from someone else as a company that's here, but they might be located in a different part of the country that doesn't really know this community, and that's part of the reason we did it. It's sovereignty. It's being able to take control of your future and be able to provide, these types of services and support to the community here. All the tribes here are different. We all do things differently. I know, most of the tribes are working on similar projects, but I'll kind of get into that when I kind of start summarizing everything. It's pretty close to the end of this, but you'll go to the next slide. These are some of the pictures that were taken to kind of show off, some of our marketing that we did with Giant Voices, people using the internet, what you can do, families working together, working from home, doing different projects, stuff like that. Next slide, please. And then, the challenges that we had when we were working on our project, it's the topology. Fond du Lac has a lot of wetlands, so there's a lot of directional boring and some trenching. But when you're doing those, we have a lot of rocks too. So our contractors, they had a lot of issues with, running into rocks, a lot of rock. And our project was, we created it, on time and actually slightly under budget, but there was a lot of issues with, with the topology and the geology around here and the materials. You have to be very detailed with your materials, inspection failures, making sure the connections are done right. The first spools of fiber we had were actually manufactured incorrectly, and we had to send them back. So then we had to wait to get new fiber back. Weather. Weather in northern Minnesota. We have late spring thaws, early freezes, wet summers, colder winters. All that stuff is not conducive when you're doing this type of construction work. It's like that all over Minnesota, but northern half of the state's a little bit worse. And then we had a lot of like a lot of people have now, we had labor shortages too as we we're trying to bring this thing over the past couple of years. Our contractors couldn't keep crews out there on a consistent basis, but we kind of weathered all that. Somehow getting it through. And next slide. The current status, we have, it's closer to 1,200 homes, ready to be connected. And we have probably 650 people that are, subscribed. And we have our own website, anin.net. Anin.com was taken. But we also got anin.biz too. But yeah, so anin.net's our website. And our first customers were actually the test subjects. But they're more than willing to accept, inconsistent service in order just to have the ability to get fiber to their homes, because a lot of homes out here didn't have internet at all. Some of the homes had DSL, but that didn't really have a big range, and the dial-up out here isn't very good either, because the old copper network here is very old, and it's very inconsistent with dial-up, and as well as the DSL. And next slide is just sort of our project team. You can see it was the planning division, our IT department, legal division, accounting, and our executive director of enterprises. And they all played huge roles in various ways to make this success. So much time and effort went from all these different departments to make this project a success. And it's almost done. It's kind of funny how many people have come and gone from this team, from these different departments over the past 6 years, since 2016 when we actually started breaking ground on things. But that's kind of that's sort of Fond du Lac's project as a whole. And I know Bernadine kind of has a presentation coming up after mine about adoption and challenges in rural communities. But I'll just kind of say, talking with other tribes about challenges, a lot of it in Minnesota, it's basically the ruralness of a lot of the tribes. It's hard, kind of like what you've been talking about with the rest of the state of Minnesota outside the metro. It's how do you get the internet out there? That's sort of an issue all the tribes have. And the tribes have been doing different things. Some have been working with CTC, Boys Fort, Mille Lacs have been. Fond du Lac, we kind of did it our own. Grand Portage have kind of been working with the energy co-ops up there. And you heard a presentation, late last year from Upper Sioux Reservation. They're just getting started. So it's going to be, the internal capacity of the reservations, and I'll say rural communities too, because you don't have, a lot of these places don't have all that, all these different talents within their organization. We just happen to have that all at once at this particular time. It was just more of it kind of started us, but it's more of coincidence that we had all this together and we started a broadband project at the same time. So we were very fortunate to have all these people together at the same time. But, the internal technical capacity to write the grant, have the engineering, the financial capability to manage those and do the reporting, the legal side to help you with, the negotiations and working with FCC, coming up with the match on grants too, is, I've been told, has been an issue for a number of organizations. I know, border grants, I know they're 50-50, and that's great. took advantage of that ourselves, but some people wished it was 75-25 or 80-20, but that's a different discussion altogether. But and then, and like I said, each tribe is different and our situation is different, but it's also the physical distance. Like White Earth Reservation is very large, but it's very wide open. Perhaps a wireless signal would work better there because it's more flat. But like Grand Portage, it's all rock and it's hilly. So I mean, what solution works best for them? So there's just so many different factors that go into play here when you're trying to look at these different things and try to get projects like this going. I suppose I can leave a few minutes for questions. I think it's been like 20-25 minutes. But it's kind of summarizing our project and some of the things I kind of hear, talking to the other tribes.
Well, thank you, Jason. So, questions for Jason? You can either raise the hand and I can call, or if you can't find that, you just come off mute. Nolan has a question.
Hey, well, first of all, thank you for that presentation. I absolutely love fiber. I mean, it's something that I deal with on a daily basis as far as doing installs. And actually, right now with the weather, there's been a ton of repairs. But I guess out of curiosity, do you actually employ full-time technicians for like install and maintenance, or is it just something that's all contracted out?
The level 1 is contracted out. The Collins Center stuff is contracted out, but we have staff on hand to actually physically do the repairs and installations.
Cool, thanks.
Yep.
Jason,
for more.
good call out. Originally, when you said 4,000 people, is it 4,000 people or 4,000 households?
It's 4,000 people, and there's about 1,500 households on Fond du Lac.
Okay. Good clarification. Brian has a question.
Not necessarily a question, just to say congratulations, Jason. I enjoyed your presentation, and definitely you battled the rural density issue. So nice project. I really like the name and your logo on marketing that too.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And then as far as the affordability, Jason, I mean, you said a lot of it was even getting it all the way into the home, right? Getting it set up, et cetera. Do you still struggle with, affordability issues from the various households, or is that something that is being discussed now or was discussed in the past?
It's been discussed now. It's been discussed in the past. The affordability. Our rate schedule is in the website. I think it's $50 a month. For 50 megs. We're kind of going with what a general rate, looking at other providers in the area. But we're starting the Universal Services Program. So if you have low income, you can get some extra, discounts for your internet. I think it was like $34 a month. And then if you're a tribal member on the reservation, you get an extra $9 a month. So depending, who you are, you can get between $34 and like $43 off per month.
Okay.
The small business owners here love it. Before, they'd have to go into Cloquet and find a wireless source to connect their business. Now they can just stay at home.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And then as far as you briefly hit on it earlier, the benefits, kind of better healthcare, kind of education with people going in, sort of taking classes online or working from home. Are you seeing now, because it's been a couple of years now, right? Are you really starting to see the fruits of all that come to fruition?
Yeah, we are. I was approached by one small business owner, and she wants to expand. I think it's partially because she has contact, she has fiber to the home now, and I think there's just more people taking classes and working from home. Cloquet wants us to try to expand our network more in order to draw more people to this part of the state, to this region, because having good internet is it's more of a draw. It's a necessity now. It's not just a luxury or a nerd thing like it was years ago. It's a necessity. and people up here are realizing that now.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments for Jason? All right, I'm not seeing any hands up or nobody going off mute. So, Jason, thank you so much for with a short turnaround, but that was really good. I think that gives us a good basis for why we do this work. Why it's important and why we need to continue pushing it. Like as you mentioned in your presentation, funding is critical. And then there's now that you get the funding, now what? And you got to put that into play as well and take advantage of it. So great overview.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, awesome. All right, so let's go to the next topic, which I think will be hand in hand. I think this was good. I wasn't exactly planned this way, but it came out that actually I think the topics will go well with one another. So, Bernadine, I'll turn it over to you. Again, it was another last-minute sort of request, and you're able to come through. So I'll turn it over to you for sort of opportunities and challenges in deploying broadband in rural communities in a lens from the Blandon Foundation.
Thank you so much, Teddy. And Jason, wow, that was a fantastic presentation. Really appreciate it. And you're right, Teddy, it was a nice kind of preview to what I'm going to talk about today. Carol, am I able to share my screen? Have you made that possible?
You should be. Is it not working?
Let me try. You guys
Yeah.
see you seeing that my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Nice. Good. Yeah, so I've always felt that our work is really, now I just can't see anybody else. I'm like blind here. I wonder where.
Yeah, no, that's what's going to happen when you share. So.
All right, I can't. Oh, there. Now that you're talking, I can see Teddy. Okay, at least I feel like I've connected in there somewhere. It won't be great when we can be back together in the room together. That the digital divide is really amplifies all the other opportunity gaps that we've had in Minnesota, and we continue to struggle with as a state. I've always felt that our work that we do at the task force is so important to reach our goals as an equitable state where zip code doesn't determine your opportunity. And I think we've all experienced that the COVID pandemic just really magnified some of our long-standing systemic inequities that we struggle with as a state. And we know that people experiencing poverty are most severely impacted by digital disenfranchisement. And so I've always seen that addressing the gaps to access and ability to use broadband is really high up on the order of, if we can impact that, we can make a big difference in a lot of the other opportunity gaps and disparities that we struggle with as a state. We know that, let's see, how do I make my next slide go here? Here we go. We know that in Minnesota, and we just heard a little bit about it from Jason, that our access challenges persist, right? These are just to kind of set the table that access to broadband, is a component of the adoption. And of course, this rural-urban gap in Minnesota persists. And this was the numbers I could find, just the closest ones of last October. You see here that over 94% of the unserved households in Minnesota are rural. And over 93% of the underserved households are rural. So in terms of just straight up ability to access the internet, rural Minnesota continues to struggle compared to metro areas. And I saw some research recently from APM Research Labs as a result of the pandemic that 1 in 7 Minnesota households that needed broadband during the pandemic said they didn't have it. And besides, the gaps about access to broadband, what Teddy asked me to talk about was adoption gaps. And what are the challenges for adopting and using broadband in Minnesota? And those gaps persist as well. And this should be, really concerning to us because, as Jason so eloquently talked about, it's the adoption and use that's the so what of broadband. The network is there so we can use it, and so gaps in adoption and use are a really deep concern for us as a state, and if only because we know that our economy is increasingly going to depend on a digitally literate public. We know that the vast majority of jobs today and in the future certainly are going to require computer skills and access and ability to use the network. And it's also a problem for Minnesota because, as my dad used to always say, compared to what? How are we doing compared to other states? And in Minnesota, we're definitely not above average. This is a screenshot from a report recently published, outfit called Broadband Now. They're a research and advocacy organization, and they've ranked Minnesota 31st out of 50 states in an assessment that looked at price and speed. So what do we know about adoption rates in rural Minnesota? From the American Community Survey data from 2020, I looked and found, with the great help of Ann Tracy, I want to give Ann a real shout out because she helped me respond to Teddy's request and pull some of this data together. So thank you, Ann, for that. This is the American Community Survey results from 2020, and they report that our overall access rate, and this means that households that are using broadband in their home, is 87% statewide. And here on the left, you'll see the two most populous counties, Hennepin and Ramsey, which together are about 32% of our 5.7 million Minnesotans. And on the right are the counties of our 87 counties with the highest rates. You can see that all of those counties are among the 15 designated by OMB as the Minneapolis-St. Paul, Bloomington, Wisconsin metropolitan statistical area. So by deduction, you can understand, looking at the average rate of 87, that there is a gap here. Of our urban metro counties have higher rates than 87%. So accordingly, we must have less adoption in our rural counties. So what could explain those rural gaps? Why are we having those gaps? And of Fond du Lac, but folks who've been on the task force will recognize this stool. It's the well-known three-legged stool of adoption. We first were presented with this concept back in 2016 when Colin Rhinesmith, who's a real noted researcher on broadband adoption, presented to the task force. Anybody that's interested could go back on the Blended Broadband blog and find his presentation to us. But he talks about the three legs of the stool, right, of broadband adoption. Devices, broadband access, which is what we heard a lot, access there, and then skills and supporting services to use those devices and use that access to broadband. And when you got all three legs of the stool in place, you're in business. You've got the platform that you need, if you will, to have adoption and use. So what are the barriers then in rural Minnesota? We're more challenged in responding to each of those three legs of the stool: devices, connectivity, and skills. A lot because of the characteristics of our rural communities. And Jason also talked a little bit about this, although this doesn't address topography so much as the human resources in rural places. In Minnesota, our rural residents are generally older and therefore less likely to be digitally literate, tend to have lower levels of educational attainment, lower income, more geographically isolated, and therefore more difficult to serve. In terms of older, it turns out that greater Minnesota, outside that metropolitan area, is home to a larger share of older adults than even though the population is so heavily concentrated in metros. Still, for example, 70% of women in the state over 65, I'm now in that demographic live in greater Minnesota, 70%. And Minnesota towns and rural communities are aging faster with more older adults than school-age children prior to 2020. And those rural aging trends are going to be continuing into the future. So older, poorer. Minnesota's rural communities have lower medium incomes. USDA's Economic Research Service reports, based on the 2019 ACS data, that the poverty rate in rural Minnesota is 10% compared to 9% in urban areas of the state. Of course, we want to also acknowledge that persistent poverty is also present, of course, in urban counties. There we see adoption gaps occurring more along neighborhood, geographic lines, and racial lines at the neighborhood level. But that said, overall, rural Minnesota is poorer, along with older than metro Minnesota, and less educated. In Minnesota, like across the nation, rural counties have lower levels of educational attainment. In Minnesota, the gap is really stark. 22% of rural Minnesotans have a bachelor's degree or higher, compared to 42% of metro-based Minnesotans. Overall, as a state, again, compared to what we're doing better on educational attainment, and I know Minnesota's always really prided itself on prioritizing and understanding the importance of public education to the common good. I said that 42% of Minnesotans in metro areas have a bachelor's degree or higher, and that compares to only 34% nationwide. And the percentage of rural residents with bachelor's degrees is also a little higher than the national average. In Minnesota, we have 22%, and nationally it's 21%. But nevertheless, the gap here of educational attainment is present in rural and does create a special set of boundaries, because we know that education levels are very highly correlated with household income. And so looking at the three legs of the stool, how we're doing in rural, in terms of devices. So devices is, clearly you have to have a device to connect and use it. And it does continue to be a problem, but it looks like it's not the biggest problem. For one thing, it's easier, as long as, again, if you have a connection, it's a little easier to solve. It's not as systemically challenging to address. And we've seen in Minnesota that, especially since the pandemic, that a lot of educators, community resource people, librarians, and others have really rushed to help address the device gap. This data here is from a report that Literacy Minnesota was asked to prepare for the Minnesota Department of Education in December of 2020. And in there, they conducted surveys and found that about 80% of the service providers and educators that they talked to had to shift to distance or virtual platforms during the pandemic. 20% of them shut down. Those that couldn't were not able to continue working. So again, it underscores how vital it is that people have ability to access the network and use it. And about 50% of the responding organizations found themselves adding services to try to address these three legs of the stool. 60% of them just started distributing devices. 56% started with helping people address access the internet, that kind of whole digital navigator role that is so important. And 47% of them began offering digital literacy services. As you see here on the slide, while 70% of the organizations that responded to Literacy Minnesota survey reported that access to a device was a, quote, moderate or significant barrier to their program participants, more than 80% cited access to the internet and digital literacy skills as moderate to significant barriers. Turning to the internet access, and we heard such a great heartrending story from Jason about Fond du Lac's ability to address this part of it. And Teddy, I appreciated your question about affordability, because research now really definitively shows that the biggest barrier to internet access is, I mean, assuming it's available there, is affordability. 20 years ago, perhaps, maybe there were still people who had yet to recognize the centrality, you know, of internet to opportunity in modern life in general. And so the questions, why do I need it, or I don't need it, was part of the reason that folks didn't access the internet. But a growing stream of research recently emphasizes that the price of fixed network subscriptions is now the primary reason that people don't subscribe. People with higher incomes are much more likely to subscribe to fixed broadband. And individuals in low-income neighborhoods and communities they face a whole complex of challenges when it comes to affording home broadband access. In terms of affordability, the three most common barriers appear to be just straight up high monthly fees. Second is the obstacles such as eligibility requirements. And then there's just the opportunity costs of other vital payments that need to be prioritized over broadband, like, say, rent or food. And so these three barriers combined can make it extremely difficult for low-income people to pay for broadband. That same Dr. Colin Rhinesmith's research suggests that low-income people can only afford about $10 a month for broadband, that's an affordable rate. One set of the participants that he met with told him that even $20 a month would be difficult. So in sum, the ability to pay rather than willingness to pay is a more accurate frame for understanding barriers to subscribing to fixed broadband in rural communities. Interestingly, the Federal Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection says that consumer debt for telecom services, which includes internet access and medical debt, as the basis for debt collection, accounting for a full 20% of debt collection revenues. And distressingly, the old EBB program, Merchant Broadband Benefit Program that came out of the initial COVID funding, continued a tradition of underutilization of Lifeline and other subsidy programs. I was able to find out that as of December 30th, when that program ended, it's been replaced now by the Affordable Connectivity Program. So just over 9,048,000 households across the country had enrolled in that program. And only 139 of those subscribers were from tribal communities. So really underutilization of that program. And besides rates they can afford, consumers also need tools to understand and compare service options. This can be a barrier to households. There's some good news here, though, because efforts to address that barrier are now in the works. I think folks may be aware that the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that IIJA, has instructed the FCC to require providers to create consumer-friendly labels with information about their broadband projects or broadband services, kind of like this. And these labels are going to include a range of information like pricing, speeds, data allowances, network management information, just to make it easier for consumers to understand and compare service options from different providers. This labels was first proposed or launched really in 2015 by the FCC as part of that open internet order. Folks may remember that, but then it really died when that open internet order was repealed in 2017. But these labels are now in development, and we should be seeing them on the marketplace in the future. So turning to the third leg of the digital adoption stool, if you will, schools and supportive services. I think we've all seen Commissioner Grove presented to us his DEED's Path to the Finish. Remember our plan for how we're going to meet our infrastructure build-out goals of the state. And in addition to that, he talked about the other federal resources and stuff that are on the way to Minnesota and other states to help address this digital literacy, digital equity gap. And, taking all of that into consideration, I think sitting here today, I'm really very optimistic and excited that the picture looks pretty bright in Minnesota. We've got resources on the way, and we've also got people and teams ready to go to work. As we've heard from Angie, this digital equity plan and then the resources to fund it mandates that the state engage in a stakeholder engagement process, and also that the deed is going to be receiving the resources necessary to support that kind of stakeholder engagement process. OBD is already leading a digital equity planning interagency working group. They're hiring a digital equity program manager. And as I said, the federal funds from IIJA includes money to help the state pay for not only the planning of a digital equity plan, but then to implement the plan into the future. So in thinking here in Minnesota, we've got a really impressive, I think, diverse group of stakeholders that are ready to go to step in with DEED and OBD to put together a compelling plan to address these affordability challenges, device challenges that we've heard about today. Of course, Literacy Minnesota is home to North Star, and the author of that community needs assessment I referenced, a well-known national leader in this space. We have an amazing library network across the state. I want to call out the Partnership for Connected MN, the public-private table that's still being built and active and ready to step into partnership with OBD as they try to do this stakeholder engagement process. Of course, we have our Minnesota Educational Technology Network. Mark's ECMEC is an example of that, one of the nodes of the technology access clusters on that terrific resource from Minnesota. And then, of course, we have in Minnesota really, geared up, ready to go local broadband champions that have been working on this for a long time. And Jason's work is a great example of that. And so just to conclude, with your indulgence, I wanted to just share directly with you, I'm going to stop sharing a second, a few voices from rural Minnesota, see if now that are talking directly about why broadband is important to them. And I'm going to try to share that. I've got a little video teed up here. I'm going to try to share that here.
As you share, Bernadine, there is a little dash that says enable volume.
Yeah, I think I got that going. Are you seeing a face here?
Yep.
All right, here we go. Just a few minutes of hearing directly from some rural people about what the difference broadband makes in their lives.
Our economy.
I've got 3 kids in school who over the last couple of years have done a lot more schoolwork from home. And we just couldn't have done it without the internet access, the broadband access we currently have.
Broadband, you said, why do I like broadband? You can't live without it. And you really can't have a great economic development program unless people are connected.
I am Holly from the city of Cloquet. I think for people who want to be places by choice and have opportunities, who don't need to travel sometimes and can do meetings. I myself have had kids that have had access to broadband, with the pandemic.
I would say if I would focus in on where my soft spot is right now is the person that says in Benton County, I don't really need broadband, because they do.
I'm from Todd County, and broadband out in the rural areas is so necessary. For us, just going to the store is a long distance. It's an hour each direction for us to go to any mall. So to have it available on broadband is actually pretty handy.
To allow their children to stay in school or continue to participate in school. It's allowed a lot of people to remain employed by working at home. And it's allowed me to attend some events that I probably never would have otherwise. So it's been a plus.
I'm grateful for broadband on a personal level just because I work from home, as does the rest of my marketing team. And I'm also attending grad school from home. My kids attended school online. But as far as the community is concerned, I also obviously see it as an economic driver and an equalizer.
I'm out in not the sticks, but a dead zone. And I would really appreciate broadband. And it would also make it so that my family members that are employed in other counties would move to Todd County to be able to work from home.
Broadband is very important to our community in many ways, economic development, but also just the personal relationships that you need to maintain.
I'm Nachalo Malaya, so I'm interning with Benton Economic Partnership. Well, I'm a student, and so I think why I'm thankful for broadband is being able to do assignments. Very important for students.
Having broadband at my home was great when I needed to work from home, or my son Greg needed to do remote learning. And I'm right with Amanda that it's a significant economic development tool for Benton County.
What broadband brings is that instant access of all types of education for home users and businesses while you're working. If you don't know a thing, you can look it up.
I'm Patrick Gary. I serve as the Redwood County Broadband Coordinator. I'm American Connection Corps Fellow with Land O'Lakes, and I'm excited about broadband because we have the potential to position our county to embrace the future and to make an investment for the future.
One thing I'm thankful for with broadband is the equal opportunity to be competitive in work, education, and to be connected.
In my business role, we help businesses, organizations, communities use the internet to succeed. So we need it, and they need it. But my children are on snow days today. One has e-learning and one does not. I'm just really thinking about all the students who have to have their work done by 3 o'clock today online and hoping they have the resources and the access that they need.
Hi, Stephen Leanne here in Redwood Falls, and broadband simply to me means education. We have ourselves a storm day today. My kid is home, and broadband is linked to his school and his education.
I'm the IT director here for Benton County. Thankful for broadband for its ability to span communication gaps, allow a lot more flexibility and efficiency for doing business, and also for the ability for our staff to be mobile and achieve a better work-life balance and be more efficient as well.
I have a mid-80-year-old person who actually resides in the Clarissa Care Unit and who has suffered from a fall, cannot have surgery because of health conditions, is in major pain, and was able to take a pain management class because of broadband.
There, did I stop sharing?
Yes.
Yes, good. Good. So there you go, Teddy. That's what I got.
No, that's great, Bernadine. Thank you so much. That was a lot of good information, and also thank you to Anne for helping with getting you some of that data. I think that was super helpful. Questions, comments from the task force members? Feel free to raise your hand or come off mute. Mark?
Yeah, just want to say thank you to Jason and Bernadine. Those were fabulous. And I think, for me and hopefully for other members of the task force, I think that informs some of what maybe we'll talk about later in terms of subgroups and so on as I think I see us, moving from just all about access to all of these other issues that are out there as well. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Steve Georgie?
Yeah, I want to thank both Jason and Bernadine. And I think, every time I hear these types of reports and stories, it just, to me, calls out for this task force and the state of Minnesota to recognize that we're falling so far behind. We're going to be, we're already less than 50% in the nation on connectivity, and doing it with these little minuscule efforts, while they may have been great in 2014, are no longer meeting the needs. Rural is where the problem is at. As Jason described, connectivity with topography and other issues and density of population is significant. And I don't get why this state won't do something more. It's so frustrating. State of Georgia, $405 million. All the funds are there from ARPA and CARES, and our state has chosen not to use them at all. They're sitting on 1.1 billion that could, actually do something to fix the problem here. We got a $5 million cap at the border to border. That's not going to get us across the finish line. We're looking at another 17 years to get these 171,000 people connected with real broadband. I just think the task force, I certainly hope other people recognize that what we're doing is not enough. We've got to get rid of that language. You've got to get rid of that cap. We've got to advocate for that at the legislature, and we've got to start thinking magnanimous stuff. I just read yesterday the state of Washington, $148 million. They got a $256 million grant, but they're willing to give. There's no caps. It's what does the project need? And the 50-50 match is not a do or die. And we've got to recognize that. We've got too many small rural communities that can't come up with those types of resources. Like Jason said, there aren't any places out there that can match $3.5 million for a $13 million project. So, I appreciate all this information. It just makes me think that, we can rest on our accolades of being the first state to have a border-to-border broadband or an office of broadband, but we've limited ourselves here, and it's not getting us to the finish line. We need to think bigger, bolder, better, and get the legislature to follow through.
Other questions or comments? Jason?
No, I just wanted to thank Bernadine for that presentation. Sort of the detail side, which I alluded to, was just more the information, sort of the backside of our project, sort of the behind the scenes side of it. So I'm glad we got to see today both sides of that.
Bernadine, I have one question for you. Of the three stools today, what do you see as the one that's severely lacking, or the one that needs the most help?
Well, as I said, I think I really am encouraged and excited about the opportunity we have to build a digital equity plan for the state that can address all of those aspects. And I see a lot of that, and there's a lot of good strategies out there now. And Mark Johnson on our team has really been leading the way around the digital navigation as a great kind of approach, because it looks at all the three aspects of it. But I think Jason's presentation really illustrates that for rural Minnesota, it is that, and people need to have access to affordable broadband. And as I tried to put out in my presentation, the affordability aspect is really a tough nut for us. Jason mentioned $50 a month, and then we have our subsidies available. Jason, I think that the new Connect Affordability plan is tribal members can get up to $75 a month under that new plan. But figuring out the affordability piece and then ensuring that rural places have access to quality broadband, that's where I think it's that affordability nut is clearly the biggest barrier to adoption.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Not seeing or hearing none. Bernie, thanks again for putting that presentation together. And it was a short turnaround, but lots of good information, and I think a lot of the basis for some of the work we'll be doing for the rest of the year. So really appreciate you taking the time to do this and to do this for us. Okay, so let's take let's see, 15-minute break. We'll be back at 11:30 a.m. and we will resume the last portion of our meeting.